At a prestigious bank in the heart of downtown Chicago, a black man steps up to the counter for what should be a routine cash withdrawal. But before he can even finish his request, the teller barely spares him a glance, dismissing him with a clipped, impatient tone as she shoves his ID aside. Within minutes, security is summoned and he's forcibly removed like some kind of criminal. All while white customers stroll out the doors with wads of cash, no questions asked. What the bank fails to realize is that they've just made a massive mistake. Because when the truth comes out, they'll learn exactly who holds the real power in this place. Ryan Davis walked into the Davis Financial Branch at precisely 9 a.m. The sleek glass doors slid open soundlessly, letting the crisp morning air follow him inside. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden streaks across the gleaming tile floor. The bank was alive with quiet efficiency. Employees in sharp business attire moved briskly behind the counters, handling transactions with precision. Customers waited in neat lines, the soft chime of the service bell ringing out at steady intervals. It was a finely tuned machine, just as Ryan had envisioned when he built this institution from the ground up. But today, he wasn't here as the CEO. No board meetings, no media appearances, no high-stakes negotiations. Just a simple withdrawal, $15,000 from his personal account. The kind of transaction any customer should be able to make without a second thought. He wasn't wearing an expensive tailored suit or a flashy watch. Just a neatly pressed light blue button-down, khaki pants, and a pair of clean sneakers. He looked like any other person going about their morning routine. And yet, as he stepped forward, his sharp gaze caught something that made his jaw tighten. At the counter, a middle-aged white man in a charcoal gray blazer stood as a teller handed him neat stacks of cash with a warm smile. Ryan caught a glimpse of the transaction slip as the man turned $20,000. No questions, no hesitation. The man pocketed the money, nodded his thanks, and walked right out the door without so much as a second glance. Ryan exhaled slowly, forcing his jaw to unclench. He'd seen this before. He'd felt it before. But today, more than ever, he was determined to make sure this kind of silent bias had no place in his own institution. Keeping his expression neutral, he stepped forward to the teller's counter. The line moved quickly, and within moments, he found himself in front of a blonde woman in a crisp navy blazer. Her nameplate read, Emily Thompson. Unlike the friendly service he'd just witnessed, Emily didn't smile. She barely looked at him before reaching under the counter and sliding a clipboard toward him. "Fill this out," she said, her voice flat, impersonal. No greeting, no courtesy. Ryan studied her face for a moment before glancing down at the form. A standard withdrawal slip. He had no issue following procedure. Rules were rules. But something about her demeanor felt off. Still, he kept his composure, pulling a pen from his pocket and quickly filling in the required details. Once done, he slid the clipboard back to her, along with his driver's license. Emily took the slip, but didn't even bother checking his ID. Instead, her eyes flicked to the amount he'd written, and immediately, she shoved the form right back across the counter. "We can't process this," she said curtly, folding her arms. Ryan frowned, his fingers brushing against the rejected slip. "Excuse me." Emily's expression didn't waver. "We don't handle large cash withdrawals like this." His brow knit together. "I just watched that man walk out with $20,000 in cash." He motioned toward the exit, where the previous customer was now stepping onto the busy sidewalk. "You didn't even hesitate with him." Emily's lips pressed into a tight line. "That's different." Ryan leaned in slightly, keeping his voice steady. "How exactly?" For the first time, Emily's gaze shifted, not out of discomfort, but irritation. Instead of answering, her eyes flicked toward the glass-walled office in the back, where Natalie Harris, the branch manager, stood watching. And in that instant, Ryan understood exactly what was happening. His eyes followed Emily's toward the office, where Natalie stood with her arms crossed, scrutinizing the exchange with a look that was both sharp and indifferent. A woman in her mid-40s, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. She had the expression of someone who had already decided how this was going to play out, long before pretending to consider the facts. The moment their eyes met, she gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. But it was enough. Emily straightened, emboldened by the silent approval of her boss. When she turned back to Ryan, her expression had cooled even further. She let out an exaggerated breath, as if she were already exhausted by the conversation. "I told you," she said, tapping the slip of paper still between them. "We can't process this transaction." Ryan inhaled deeply, forcing himself to stay composed. "And I'm asking you why." Emily didn't respond right away. Instead, she tapped her manicured nails against the counter in a slow, deliberate rhythm, stalling. Finally, she sighed, tilting her head. "It's just unusual," she said, her voice carrying that sickly sweet tone people used when pretending to be reasonable. "A cash withdrawal this large, it raises concerns." Ryan let the word settle between them. Suspicious. He knew that word well. Felt it in his bones every time someone like Emily dressed up bias in polite language. He'd been playing this game his entire life, navigating unwritten rules that dictated who was automatically trusted and who had to prove, over and over, that they even belonged. "He didn't seem suspicious when he did the exact same thing," Ryan said evenly. He didn't need to point. They both knew exactly who he meant. "So tell me, Emily, what's the difference?" For the briefest moment, something flickered in her expression, a hesitation, barely noticeable. Then, just as quickly, she recovered, shaking her head. "Sir, I don't make the rules." Ryan let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. "You don't make the rules," he repeated, his voice dry. "But you sure as hell know how to apply them selectively." Emily's posture stiffened, her lips pressing into a firm, thin line. "I need to get my manager," she said abruptly, her voice clipped and firm. Without waiting for a response, she spun on her heel and disappeared into the back office. Ryan didn't move. His fingertips rested against the cool counter, tapping idly, mirroring the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The air inside the bank had shifted, subtle but undeniable, like the space itself had picked up on the quiet tension brewing beneath the surface. He could feel the weight of eyes on him, tellers sneaking glances, customers shifting in place, uneasy, aware that something was happening but unwilling to involve themselves. A few feet away, a middle-aged white woman, likely in her early 50s, observed him with a barely concealed curiosity. He caught the name on the tag pinned to her purse, Samantha Foster. She stood near the customer service desk, hands folded tightly over the strap, as if debating whether to speak. Ryan met her gaze for a fleeting moment. She hesitated, then offered a small, uncertain smile. He didn't return it, not out of anger toward her specifically, but because he knew exactly how this played out. People like Samantha watched. They whispered. They noticed when things like this happened, but they rarely stepped in. The door to the back office swung open. Natalie Harris emerged, her heels clicking crisply against the tile, her expression unreadable. Behind her, Emily followed closely, chin lifted slightly, the quiet confidence of someone who knew they had backup. Natalie stopped at the counter, smoothing the front of her blazer as she took him in. "Good morning, sir," she greeted, her tone polished and professional, the kind of voice used to handle difficult customers. "I understand you're looking to make a large withdrawal today." Ryan held her gaze, unwavering. "I am." Her smile was practiced, polite, but empty. "Unfortunately, we have certain security protocols in place for transactions of this size." Ryan tilted his head. "Security protocols?" "Yes," she answered smoothly. "For the safety of both our customers and staff, we have to exercise extra caution when handling high-value withdrawals." Ryan folded his arms, shifting slightly. "And what exactly does that mean for me?" Natalie's expression softened in that way meant to appear sympathetic, but it wasn't. It was the kind of look people gave when they were about to tell you something condescending. "It means we need to verify some additional information before proceeding." Ryan exhaled sharply through his nose. "You mean my information?" His voice was steady, controlled. "Because I just watched that man withdraw more than me, without a single question." Natalie's polite expression didn't waver, but the subtle tightening of her jaw betrayed her. She wasn't used to being challenged. I can't speak on other customers' transactions, she replied, her tone sharpening. But in this case, I'll need to confirm the source of these funds and verify the amount of your last deposit. Ryan felt his patience thinning. He gestured toward the screen in front of her. You've got my account number right there. Look it up. Natalie's gaze hardened. I'm going to need you to cooperate, Mr. Davis. A short, incredulous laugh escaped Ryan. Cooperate. He shook his head. I'm standing here, giving you everything you need to do your job, and yet you're still looking for a reason to deny me. That's not protocol. He let the word hang in the air before delivering the truth. That's profiling. The impact was immediate. The room itself seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. He saw it in Natalie's flickering expression, in the way Emily stiffened behind her, in the way the tellers and customers subtly recoiled, unsure of what would happen next. Natalie opened her mouth, then closed it, carefully measuring her next move. Then, without breaking eye contact with Ryan, she raised a single hand and made a small, sharp motion. Across the room, someone moved. Lucas Martin, the bank's security guard, a broad-shouldered white man in his mid-30s, straightened from where he'd been leaning near the entrance. His eyes flicked from Natalie to Ryan. No hesitation. He started walking toward the counter. Ryan remained still as Lucas approached, his heavy boots echoing against the polished tile. The guard was built like a boulder, tall, solid, the kind of man who didn't need to flash a badge to remind people he had authority. It was in the way he carried himself, the way he took up space. His expression was neutral. His posture wasn't. Shoulders squared, hands loose at his sides. His movements were slow, deliberate, the kind that signaled an unnecessary escalation was about to unfold. Natalie didn't glance at him. She didn't need to. The silent command had already been given. She kept her focus locked on Ryan, waiting, watching. She expected compliance. They always did. Ryan inhaled deeply, steady, controlled. He kept his expression unreadable, even as something hot and familiar curled in his chest. He had seen this happen too many times before. It was practically scripted. A scene as old as time. A black man being treated like a threat in a space where he was supposed to belong. I'm going to ask you again, Natalie said, her voice still smooth, still professional, like she wasn't orchestrating his removal in real time. Can you verify the source of these funds? Ryan's jaw tensed. My paycheck, he said evenly. Like every other time I've deposited money into this account. Natalie tilted her head slightly, flicking her gaze to Emily, who stood rigid behind the counter, arms crossed. And can you provide the exact amount of your last deposit? Ryan stared at her. He could feel the room pressing in around him. Other customers avoided looking in his direction, pretending not to hear. Tellers suddenly found their work very interesting. Samantha Foster, still by the customer service desk, shifted uneasily. Her grip on her purse strap tightened. She wanted to say something. He could see it. In the way she fidgeted, in the way her lips parted, as if testing the words before ultimately deciding. Not my place. Ryan dragged a slow hand down his face, exhaling through his nose. You have my account number right there, he said, forcing his voice to remain even. Why don't you just look it up? Natalie didn't blink. That's not how we do things here. A low, humorless chuckle escaped Ryan. That's interesting, he said, voice edged with something sharper now. Because I've banked here for years, and not once have I been asked these questions. He took a step closer to the counter, his patience officially gone. Not once, he said, have I ever been treated like I don't belong. So tell me, Natalie, what exactly makes you think I don't? The question hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Silence followed, heavy, expectant. Emily's eyes darted toward Natalie, her uncertainty now plain on her face. Even she realized this had gone beyond mere policy and into something far more insidious. But Natalie? She didn't waver. If anything, the subtle smirk on her lips hinted at how much she relished the control she believed she had in that moment. Her gaze flicked past Ryan, a quick, almost imperceptible shift of her eyes that spoke louder than words ever could. At that same moment, Lucas Martin stepped beside him, his presence looming close enough for Ryan to feel it, a shadow lingering just at the edge of his vision. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Lucas said, his tone devoid of emotion, distant, like Ryan was nothing more than a trivial inconvenience. As if he wasn't a paying customer at the very bank he had helped build. Ryan turned his head slowly, locking eyes with the guard for the first time. He studied him, searching for any flicker of hesitation, any hint of doubt. He found none. And yet, Ryan knew Lucas hadn't made this decision on his own. This was Natalie's doing, Emily's doing, all of them. The moment he had walked through those doors, they had already made up their minds. He didn't belong. He wasn't worth the same level of respect, the same courtesy, the same trust that had been so easily afforded to the man before him. And the only difference between them? Skin. Nothing more. And now, they were throwing him out. Ryan inhaled deeply, exhaled slow. His patience, already stretched thin, was wearing down fast. He had played along with this charade long enough. Deliberately, he reached into his pocket, moving with a measured calm, and pulled out his phone. With a tap, the screen unlocked. He raised it slightly and pressed record. "You're refusing to process my withdrawal," he stated, voice even but loud enough to carry. "Despite having my ID, my account information, and despite approving an even larger withdrawal for a white customer right before me." Emily stiffened. Natalie's jaw tensed. Lucas's posture grew rigid. "I'll ask you again," Lucas said, though his voice held just a trace of unease now. "Step outside." Ryan's fingers tightened around his phone. "And if I don't?" Lucas didn't hesitate. A firm grip latched onto Ryan's forearm, fingers pressing just hard enough to make it clear. This wasn't a request anymore. Ryan barely had a second to brace himself before he was yanked backward. His shoulder collided with Lucas's solid frame as the guard spun him toward the door, shoving him forward with enough force to make him stumble. A sharp gasp broke the silence. Someone muttered in disbelief, "What the hell?" But no one intervened. Ryan barely caught his balance before another shove sent him harder against the glass door. The impact jolted up his spine, but he refused to react, refused to give them the satisfaction. The door swung open from a force, and before he knew it, he was outside. The cold morning air hit him like a slap. Behind him, Lucas stood in the doorway, arms folded, staring down at him with vacant indifference. And then, the final insult. His ID, the very thing they had ignored, the very proof of who he was tossed carelessly to the ground. The small plastic card hit the pavement with a hollow clatter. A fire burned in Ryan's chest, something raw, something smoldering dangerously close to rage. But before he could move, before he could reach for it, a shadow passed over him. Another security guard, Tyler Brooks. Black, mid-30s, not physically tired, but exhausted in a way that ran far deeper. His face betrayed little, but there was something in his eyes as he crouched down, picked up the discarded ID, and dusted it off with careful, almost reverent hands before holding it out to Ryan. "This place," Tyler muttered under his breath, just loud enough for Ryan to hear, "always pulls this crap." Ryan took the ID, his fingers briefly brushing against Tyler's before the man pulled back. Tyler exhaled, shaking his head. "Doesn't matter if you got a degree, if you got the credentials, if you keep your head down and do everything right," he said, his voice heavy with years of quiet endurance. "They don't want us here. Not in the offices, not at the top." He glanced back at Lucas, his expression somewhere between resignation and disgust. "We're security. We're janitors. We're just numbers to make them look good." His voice dropped lower, just for Ryan. "And this ain't new." Ryan held his gaze, heart still pounding, adrenaline still thick in his veins. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached into his pocket once more. This time, he wasn't recording. He was dialing. The line rang once, twice. Then, "John Thompson." A crisp voice answered. Ryan's grip on his phone tightened. "I need you at the Chicago branch." Now, there was a beat of silence on the other end. Then a sharp inhale. 15 minutes. Ryan ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket. His fingers curled around his ID, the hard edges pressing into his palm, keeping his fury tethered, keeping it from spilling over. His gaze flicked to Tyler, who stood beside him, hands on his hips, his eyes shifting between Ryan and the glass doors where Lucas still stood, stationed like a watchdog. Tyler let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Well," he muttered, shaking his head, "this is about to get real interesting." Ryan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next 15 minutes stretched on endlessly. Through the glass, the bank carried on as if nothing had happened. Natalie stood behind the counter, speaking to Emily, her movements brisk, detached, unconcerned. Lucas remained planted by the door, arms crossed, his eyes flickering toward Ryan now, and then, but never holding his gaze for long. Samantha Foster had vanished, probably deciding it was easier to disappear than to bear witness to something uncomfortable. Typical. And then, finally, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver barely had time to put it in park before the door swung open and John Thompson stepped out. He was the kind of man who commanded attention without ever having to demand it. White, early 50s, salt and pepper hair, tailored suit, sharp eyes. Unlike the shallow professionalism Ryan had been met with inside, John's authority was real, earned, not performed. And he wasted no time. His gaze landed on Ryan, and his expression hardened. Then he moved. Lucas straightened as John approached, something uncertain flashing across his face. He must have recognized him, must have realized that this wasn't just another customer. But John didn't even spare the guard a glance. As he strode inside, the bank's atmosphere shifted. The air seemed to tighten as the glass doors slid open for him. His presence cut through the tension like a knife through silk. Ryan followed, his steps measured and deliberate, though anticipation curled tight in his chest. Tyler hesitated for just a beat before falling in behind them. The moment Natalie laid eyes on John, something flickered across her expression, a mix of confusion and realization. She straightened immediately, smoothing the front of her blazer as she forced herself into a composed stance. Behind her, Emily stiffened visibly. "Mr. Thompson." Natalie greeted him, her voice carefully even, her professional mask snapping into place. "I wasn't expecting." John didn't let her finish. "No, clearly," he cut in, his tone as cold as steel. "Because if you had, this wouldn't be happening." Natalie's lips parted, but she quickly pressed them shut. For the briefest moment, discomfort flashed across her face, but she recovered fast. "Sir, I believe there's been some sort of misunderstanding." John's reply was smooth and unwavering. "Oh, there's no misunderstanding." His eyes flicked toward Ryan for a split second before locking back onto her. "What I don't understand is why my CEO was just thrown out of his own bank." The room fell into dead silence. Emily paled. Lucas, who had been stationed by the door, went rigid. Even the tellers, who had been doing their best to appear uninvolved, froze mid-task. Natalie blinked. Then again. For the first time, her perfectly maintained composure cracked ever so slightly. She opened her mouth, but it was too late. "Don't," John said, his voice like tempered steel. His gaze shifted to Emily. "You denied his transaction." Emily swallowed hard. "Sir, I was just following protocol." John let the words hang in the air, his tone edged with disbelief. Protocol. He let the silence stretch, allowing its weight to settle over the room. "That's what we're calling blatant discrimination now." Emily's mouth opened as if to respond, but no sound came out. John didn't wait. His attention snapped back to Natalie. "Tell me, Natalie," he said, his words slow, deliberate. "Did you bother checking his account before deciding he didn't have the right to access his own money?" Natalie inhaled sharply, her composed facade fracturing at the seams. "Sir, yes or no?" John's voice dropped to a lethal calm. She hesitated just for a moment, but that moment was enough. John exhaled slowly, controlled, his gaze sweeping over the room, from Emily to Lucas, to the tellers who had watched but said nothing. He let the silence stretch longer, pressing down on them all like an unspoken verdict. Then, finally, "You're done here." Natalie went stiff. "Sir." "Effective immediately," John continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "And if I find out this kind of treatment has happened to other customers," his gaze flicked to Lucas. Or if anyone under my leadership thinks they can use their position to enforce their own biases, he left the rest unsaid, letting the unspoken threats settle over them. You won't just lose your job. You'll answer for it legally. Lucas had the decency to avert his eyes. Natalie's face burned crimson, a stark contrast to the icy confidence she had held just moments ago. This is completely unnecessary. Unnecessary? Ryan finally spoke, his voice sharp with disbelief. You had me thrown out like a criminal. You wouldn't even glance at my ID. You didn't check your own system. His stare hardened. You knew exactly what you were doing. Natalie flinched. John turned back to Ryan then, something like regret flashing in his eyes, though he knew an apology wouldn't undo what had already been done. He gave a firm nod, then shifted his attention to Tyler. And you? John asked. Tyler straightened. Sir. John studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. You're promoted. Tyler's eyes widened, his stance shifting slightly. You deserve better than working under people like this, John said simply, then turned back to Ryan. Ryan, he said, his voice softer now, familiar, a stark contrast to the authority he had wielded moments before. Do you want this branch cleaned out? Ryan didn't hesitate. Completely. John gave a single nod, as if the decision had already been made. Then, turning back to the stunned employees, he spoke with finality. Everyone involved in this incident is to be reported for bias training. Mandatory. His gaze landed on Lucas. That includes security. His words settled like the final nail in a coffin. Natalie opened her mouth again, but no words came out. Ryan took a slow breath, steady and controlled. Then, without sparing her another glance, he stepped forward, reclaiming his place at the counter. Emily moved aside immediately. John gestured to the computer. Process his withdrawal. This time, no one dared to argue. The crisp stacks of bills were counted out, placed neatly before Ryan. His money. His. Not something to be questioned. Not something to be justified. Just his. As he picked up the cash, his eyes flicked to Tyler, who was still standing there, looking a little dazed, still processing what had just unfolded. Ryan slid one of the stacks toward him. Tyler frowned. Sir. Ryan held his gaze. Take the day off. Tyler hesitated, then slowly reached for the cash, fingers curling around the bills. Ryan finally turned back to Natalie, meeting her gaze one last time. You should have checked my ID, he said. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. This time, nobody dared to stop him.